you, Bob. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me here today, and thank everyone for being here. You know, it is such a beautiful day outside, and it really means something that you have decided to dedicate some of your time in remembrance of those who've fallen fighting for this country. I'm always honored to have invitations to speak for Memorial Day, and the events always bring to mind for me particular names and faces, as they do for most of us who've served, and for any of you who've had a loved one leave home for military service and never return. I should say that I am the substitute speaker today. I got a call from Junior Holland saying that you all needed a speaker because he wasn't sure he was going to be available. So I was the backup speaker. And then the next day, I got a call from the Human Rights Coalition asking me if I could speak on May 16th, but I could not, I told them, and I started going through my phone. I said, I do have Heidi Heitkamp's number. And she said, oh, we already tried her. So generally, if you can't get Heidi Heitkamp and you're not sure you can get Junior Holland, you dial up Trygve Hammer. Yeah, my wife Kelly enjoys Memorial Day commemorations, maybe even more than me, but a couple of the very, very few ways in which I mildly irritate her are centered on my Memorial Day speeches. First, she doesn't care for the grumpy period I go through for a couple of months as I starve, run, repeat in order to be able to fit into my Marine Corps dress blues that were fitted for me in 1990. Now, fortunately, being Norwegian and Lutheran and North Dakotan, it's really hard to tell my grumpy from my overjoyed. So it's not that big a deal. Unfortunately, I have just recently recovered from an injury that interfered with my usual Spartan weight loss regimen. And I promise that if you need a substitute for Junior Holland on some future Memorial Day, I will show up in those 1990 altered dress blues. There's no way my lips will be in any kind of shape to play the trumpet, though. Kelly also does not love the way I write my Memorial Day speeches. Well, really all of my speeches, the ones that I actually write, in the hours and minutes before I deliver them. But this year would be different, I told her. We would be on vacation in DC for my son's medical school graduation until the day before my Sunday speech, yesterday, at Bertha Lutheran Church out on the prairie northwest of Washburn. There's no way I would be sitting on the airplane writing that speech on the way home before giving it the next day. That would be insane, even for me. Now, we did end up arriving at the church a couple minutes late yesterday, and I blame Kelly. She doesn't like gravel roads like the one that led straight to the church, so when we hit a hardtop, she took a right and went a mile down. That did not lead to a secret freeway to the church that Google Maps was unaware of. So we ended up taking two even worse gravel roads and a final section of the one that she had abandoned. Not how I would have done it, but I was busy writing a speech. Now, there's an advantage to my last-minute speech writing method, which was pointed out to me at a civic event in Minot. At the end of the event, an older couple approached me and said that they had seen two of my Memorial Day speeches and thought they were the best ones they had ever heard. The woman really said how she liked that they were not just a recitation of the history of Memorial Day, that they were really about something. And I said, well, I'm so glad that you like them, and I'm curious, what were they about to you that you really enjoyed? And the husband said, what I liked best was that they were about 5 minutes long. So one cannot write a long, boring speech on the day of an event. But some would say I have proven that it's entirely possible to write a short, boring speech in the minutes before it is delivered. Another advantage of writing a speech on the fly is that your themes naturally emerge in an unvarnished way. In the first Memorial Day speech that couple had heard, I began with the story of a phone call from my teenage daughter on a bright, cold day in North Dakota in January. My youngest, Francesca, was calling from Ford Island in the middle of Pearl Harbor. She believed that her death was imminent. In the background, a civil defense warning said, "Ballistic missile inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill." That phone call turned out to be a gift, I said. When my daughter believed she was about to die, her first thought was to call her father. I went on to imagine what those who have been lost in service to our country might tell us if we could have a phone call with them. They might tell us to put away our phones and engage with our neighbors, I said. They might tell us to start talking to rather than shouting past one another. The following Memorial Day, I began with the story of Navy Lieutenant Michael McGreevy, a Navy SEAL who had been one of my midshipmen when I was a company officer at the Naval Academy. He was killed in Afghanistan when the helicopter he was in was hit by an RPG during the rescue mission depicted in the movie Lone Survivor. Later in that speech, I talked about the story from 1 Kings chapter 19 of the prophet Elijah hiding in a cave in the mountains of Judah and waiting for God. There comes a strong wind that breaks the rocks, but God is not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but God is not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, a fire, but God is not in the fire. And then there came a still small voice, and Elijah stepped out of the cave. I encouraged the audience that year to ignore those strident voices that inspire outrage and try to drive us apart, and instead listen for that still small voice, that voice of our better angels. Looking at those speeches, I realized that I did have a theme, and that it was an answer to a question a reporter had asked me. The reporter said, most people are not out here today. Many people are at the lake, they're picnicking, they're enjoying the first taste of summer. How can they and all of us best honor those who've fallen in service to our country? And I said, we do that by making sure that the United States of America always remains a country worthy of their sacrifice. And that begins with being better citizens and better neighbors. So there's this guy that talked about being a neighbor way back when. Jesus is his name. And he meets with an expert in the law. And the expert in the law asks him, well, who is my neighbor? And in the story, he's trying to trick Jesus into saying something that he shouldn't say. So Jesus then tells the story of the Good Samaritan. And at the end of the story, Jesus asks, who then was this man's neighbor? And the expert replies, he who showed him mercy. Now also in the Beatitudes, Jesus says, blessed are the merciful. So one of the ways that we are better citizens and better neighbors is by learning to be merciful. And I would argue that the first person we need to learn to be merciful to is ourselves, because we are often our own worst critics. A couple of years ago, my wife thought maybe I had PTSD. Makes sense, I taught science in Granville for 3 years. And because she heard me, and I had developed over time this really angry, abusive drill sergeant who would yell at me, and that was my way of getting things done. He would tell me, how bad I was, and what a lazy bum I was, and what was I even doing here, and who did I think I was. So that started coming out. I would actually kind of talk to myself, and she would overhear it. So she thought I had PTSD, and I went off to see a therapist and talked for a while, and she said, I don't know about PTSD, but I am certain that you have ADHD. And I said, oh, great, everybody has ADHD these days. But then I came home, and on the first day I took the medicine, I kept waiting for it to kick in. And while I waited for it to kick in, I was sorting things, filing things. These are things I'm not very good at. And I didn't know what was going on until the end when it wore off. And all that noise started again, and all that anxiety over really nothing, something I've been doing all day long and got an amazing amount of stuff done. And in that moment, I almost cried because I realized how unmerciful I'd been to myself for so very long. So 3 weeks ago, I attended a talk titled, How Much is Enough? By this guy named Kai He. And the second way I think that we can be better citizens and better neighbors is by knowing the answer to this question, how much is enough? If we never ask ourselves ahead of time, how much is enough will always be answered with a little bit more. When you ask a millionaire, someone with $1 million, how much more do you need to feel comfortable? They'll say double, 2 million. If you ask that question of someone who has 10 million, they'll say 20 million. It turns out we always want twice as much as we really have. And there are plenty of people in this world who want more power, who want more money, who will be careless with the lives and the property of others in order to get it. And one way we can be better neighbors, better citizens, is by figuring out what is enough and being less covetous. I can tell you from my time in Iraq that some of the best memories are built in the times of worst privation. And I can almost guarantee that those we've lost in service to country would tell you the same thing. When my daughter believed she was about to die, she discovered that a conversation with her father was enough. It was more important than the fancy iPhone she was having that conversation on. She coveted nothing else. So let's all realize that we are enough. Let's all go be better citizens, better neighbors. I today would like to reaffirm my oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. I wish you all the best. I thank you again for having me here. God bless you all. God bless all who have served or are serving. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you.